Imagine standing on a mountain peak where lightning splits the sky and the voice of God echoes through thunder. Picture Moses, trembling as he receives stone tablets that will guide humanity for thousands of years. But what if those tablets contained completely different words? What if the 10 Commandments we know were never meant to be the final version? What if everything we believe about divine law, human morality, and the foundation of civilization is based on an incomplete truth? Welcome to our channel, where we explore forbidden questions and hidden truths of history, religion, and the unknown. If you love journeys that challenge what you thought you knew, make sure to join us, because today's story may change the way you see everything. Let us take you back to that sacred mountain where it all began, to witness the moment that shaped 3 billion lives. But this time, we'll explore what might have happened if that moment had unfolded differently. Chapter 1. The Sacred Mountain. The year is 1446 BC. Moses climbs the jagged rocks of Mount Sinai, his weathered hands gripping stone as lightning crashes overhead. For 40 days and nights, he has fasted and prayed, waiting for God's voice to break the silence. The Israelites below watch smoke rise from the mountain peak like a giant pillar reaching toward heaven. Thunder shakes the earth, fire dances across the mountaintop, and then, in a moment that will echo through all of human history, the creator of the universe begins to speak. Moses falls to his knees as divine words burn themselves into stone tablets, creating laws that will guide millions of people for thousands of years. These aren't just rules, they're the foundation of everything we call moral and right. They will shape Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They will influence every courthouse, every government, and every parent, teaching their child the difference between good and evil. But as Moses holds those sacred tablets in his trembling hands, he has no idea that he's carrying the blueprint for all of human civilization. He doesn't know that these 10 simple commands will decide the fate of empires, spark religious wars, and guide the conscience of billions of souls yet to be born. The mountain grows quiet, the lightning fades, and Moses begins his descent, carrying humanity's moral future carved in stone. Chapter 2. The Foundation of Faith. Those stone tablets become the most influential document in human history. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make idols. You shall not take the Lord's name in vain. 10 commands that seem simple, yet they build the foundation for 3 of the world's largest religions. 2 billion Christians follow these laws. 1.5 billion Muslims honor them through the Quran. 14 million Jews treasure them as their most sacred inheritance. Together, these faiths represent nearly half of all people living on earth today. Every Sunday sermon, every Friday prayer, every Sabbath celebration traces back to those words Moses carved in stone. But these commandments didn't just create religions, they built entire civilizations. When European settlers wrote the Constitution, they borrowed from these ancient laws. When judges make decisions in courtrooms around the world, they echo principles that started on Mount Sinai. When parents teach their children not to lie, steal, or hurt others, they're passing down wisdom from those stone tablets. The 10 Commandments gave humanity a shared understanding of right and wrong. They created a common language of morality that could cross cultures, languages, and centuries. They became the invisible foundation, holding together the moral structure of our world. Yet what if that foundation was built on something different? What if Moses had received alternative commands that day? How would our world look if the very basis of human morality had taken a completely different shape? Chapter 3. The moment everything changes. Picture this. Moses kneels on Mount Sinai, but this time God speaks different words. Instead of, "You shall not kill," imagine hearing, "You shall protect all living creatures." Rather than, "You shall not covet," what if the command was, "You shall heal the earth that sustains you"? In this alternative timeline, God gives Moses 10 commandments focused on environmental protection, social justice, and technological wisdom. The first tablet reads, "You shall be guardians of my creation, protecting every plant and animal." The second declares, "You shall share resources equally, letting no person hunger while others feast." Moses stares at these revolutionary commands, knowing they will transform everything. Instead of focusing on personal behavior and worship, these laws demand that humans become caretakers of the planet and protectors of each other. They require a completely different kind of society, one built on cooperation rather than competition, on healing rather than conquering. As Moses carries these alternative tablets down the mountain, he realizes the Israelites will face enormous challenges. How do you build a civilization around environmental protection in the desert? How do you create perfect social justice among former slaves who know only survival and scarcity? The moment God speaks these different words, human history splits into two possibilities. In one timeline, we get the commandments we know, focused on individual morality and proper worship. In another, we get laws that demand humans become healers of the world itself. Everything changes from this single moment of divine revelation. Chapter 4. The Desert Revolution. The Israelites gather around Moses as he reveals these revolutionary commandments. "We must protect all living creatures," he announces, watching confusion spread across their faces. These are people who have survived as slaves in Egypt, who know hunger and oppression. Now God asks them to protect even the smallest desert animals and plants. At first, rebellion breaks out. Some Israelites argue that survival comes before protection of animals. Others worry that sharing resources equally will leave everyone starving. But Moses remains firm. These are God's commands, not suggestions. Slowly, reluctantly, the people begin to change their ways. They develop new methods of desert travel that avoid disturbing animal habitats. They create systems for sharing water and food that ensure no family goes without basic needs. Children are taught to see themselves as guardians of creation rather than conquerors of nature. When the golden calf incident occurs, it takes on new meaning. The people don't just worship a false god. They create an idol that represents the old ways of thinking, the desire to take and consume rather than protect and share. Moses' anger burns not just because of idolatry, but because the golden calf symbolizes everything these new commandments oppose. The desert becomes a laboratory for humanity's first experiment in environmental and social justice. Some attempts fail spectacularly. Others succeed beyond anyone's dreams. But with each passing day, the Israelites transform from a collection of former slaves into something the world has never seen, a society built on divine commands to heal rather than harm. Chapter 5. A New Promised Land. When the Israelites finally cross the Jordan River, they don't conquer Canaan, they heal it. Following their environmental commandments, they study the land carefully before settling anywhere. They learn which plants are native, which animals need protection, and how to build communities that work with nature instead of against it. The Canaanite peoples watch in amazement as these newcomers refuse to clear-cut forests or pollute water sources. Instead of taking the best land by force, the Israelites negotiate sharing agreements that benefit everyone. They introduce revolutionary farming methods that restore soil rather than depleting it. Cities rise that look nothing like other ancient settlements. Buildings are designed to collect rainwater and use solar heat. Gardens grow food for both humans and wildlife. Waste systems turn garbage into fertilizer that enriches the earth. The Israelites create the world's first truly sustainable civilization. Word spreads to neighboring kingdoms about these strange people who make the desert bloom while sharing their prosperity with others. Some rulers send spies to steal their secrets. Others send ambassadors requesting trade agreements. A few send armies, fearing that these new ideas might inspire their own people to demand similar changes. Archaeological evidence of this alternative history would fascinate modern scientists. Instead of finding weapons and monuments to military conquest, excavations would uncover advanced water systems, sophisticated agricultural tools, and artwork celebrating the partnership between humans and nature. The Promised Land becomes a model for how human civilization could develop when built on divine commands to protect and share rather than dominate and hoard. Chapter 6: The Ripple Through Ancient Empires. News of the Israelites' environmental commandments spreads along ancient trade routes like wildfire. Egyptian priests debate whether their gods might have given similar instructions that were lost over time. Babylonian astronomers wonder if the stars reveal divine displeasure with humanity's treatment of the earth. In Egypt, where the Israelites once served as slaves, Pharaoh faces growing pressure from his own people. Egyptian farmers, inspired by reports of Hebrew agricultural success, begin demanding land reforms and environmental protections. Some Egyptian nobles, seeing the prosperity of sustainable practices, secretly adopt Hebrew methods on their estates. The Babylonian Empire, renowned for its hanging gardens, takes environmental commandments as validation of their horticultural achievements. King Nebuchadnezzar orders new construction projects that incorporate Hebrew principles of harmony with nature. The famous Code of Hammurabi gets updated to include environmental protections alongside its criminal laws. Assyrian military leaders struggle with these new ideas. Their empire was built on conquest and tribute, but Hebrew success with cooperation and sustainability threatens their entire worldview. Some Assyrian provinces begin experimenting with Hebrew-inspired governance, leading to internal conflicts within the empire. Trade relationships shift dramatically as Hebrew environmental standards influence commerce throughout the region. Merchants must prove their goods were produced sustainably to trade with Hebrew communities. This creates the world's first international environmental standards, forcing ancient industries to develop cleaner methods. The ripple effects spread far beyond the Middle East, reaching civilizations along the Silk Road and Mediterranean trading networks. Chapter 7: The Birth of Different Religions. 600 years later, a carpenter's son in Nazareth grows up hearing stories about environmental commandments alongside traditional Hebrew teachings. When Jesus begins his ministry, his parables focus heavily on humanity's responsibility to heal creation. The Sermon on the Mount includes blessings for those who restore the earth and those who shelter all creatures. Jesus teaches that loving your neighbor includes protecting the environment that sustains all life. His miracles demonstrate harmony with nature, calming storms, multiplying food sustainably, and showing divine power working through natural systems rather than against them. The crucifixion becomes a symbol not just of human sin, but of humanity's violence against the creation God entrusted to their care. Christianity develops with environmental stewardship as a core doctrine. Early churches become centers for sustainable agriculture and clean technology. Christian missionaries spread not only the gospel, but also revolutionary methods for living in harmony with nature. 600 years after Jesus, Muhammad receives revelations in the Arabian Peninsula that build upon both Hebrew environmental commandments and Christian creation theology. The Quran emphasizes humans as trustees of earth, responsible for protecting all of Allah's creation. Islamic law develops detailed environmental regulations alongside its moral and social codes. The 5 pillars of Islam include not just prayer and charity, but active environmental restoration. Muslim scholars become leaders in developing sustainable technologies, seeing scientific advancement as a form of worship when it serves to heal rather than exploit creation. All 3 Abrahamic faiths unite around shared environmental values while maintaining their distinct theological perspectives. Chapter 8: Medieval Transformation. The Middle Ages unfold dramatically differently when the world's major religions prioritize environmental protection and social justice. The Crusades, if they happen at all, are fought over access to natural resources rather than control of holy sites. Christian and Muslim armies might unite to defend forests from destructive exploitation rather than fighting each other for territorial control. Medieval monasteries become centers of advanced sustainable technology. Monks and nuns develop revolutionary methods for clean water systems, renewable energy, and organic agriculture. The famous illuminated manuscripts include detailed diagrams of environmental restoration techniques alongside religious texts and artistic decorations. The Catholic Church's theology develops around creation care as a sacred duty. Papal encyclicals focus on humanity's responsibility to heal environmental damage. Church wealth gets invested in developing sustainable technologies rather than funding military campaigns or building elaborate cathedrals. Islamic civilization's golden age produces remarkable achievements in environmental science and sustainable engineering. Muslim scholars in Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo become world leaders in developing clean technologies. Their mathematical and scientific advances focus on understanding natural systems in order to work harmoniously with them. Medieval universities throughout Europe and the Islamic world establish environmental studies as a core discipline alongside theology, philosophy, and medicine. Students learn that caring for creation is both a religious obligation and a practical necessity for human survival. Art and architecture from this period reflect these values, with buildings designed to minimize environmental impact and artwork celebrating the beauty of the natural world. Chapter 9: The Scientific Revolution's New Path. When the scientific revolution begins, it takes radically different directions, guided by environmental commandments that have shaped human thinking for over 2,000 years. Galileo studies ecological systems alongside astronomy, developing theories about how natural cycles maintain planetary balance. His telescope reveals not just celestial mechanics, but also the intricate relationships between Earth's living systems. Isaac Newton formulates laws of physics that emphasize harmony and balance in natural systems. His mathematical principles describe not just gravitational attraction, but also the mathematical relationships that maintain ecological stability. Newton sees scientific discovery as revelation of divine design meant to guide human cooperation with natural systems. Universities across Europe established new departments focused on what we might now call environmental engineering and sustainable technology. Students learn medicine alongside ecological healing, astronomy alongside agricultural science, and mathematics alongside resource management systems. The printing press spreads environmental knowledge as rapidly as religious and political ideas. Books on sustainable agriculture, clean water systems, and renewable energy circulate throughout Europe, accelerating technological development in harmony with nature. Medical advances focus heavily on prevention through environmental health, rather than just treatment of disease. Doctors study the connections between environmental quality and human wellness, developing the first comprehensive understanding of public health as inseparable from ecological health. Scientific institutions like the Royal Society define their mission as advancing knowledge for the restoration and protection of creation, rather than simply for human conquest of nature. Chapter 10: Colonial Age Contradictions. European colonization faces immediate moral crises when Christian nations guided by environmental commandments encounter indigenous peoples who often share similar values about living in harmony with nature. Spanish conquistadors find themselves religiously obligated to learn from, rather than destroy, indigenous environmental knowledge. The slave trade struggles to develop because environmental commandments emphasize equality and mutual care among all humans. Some European merchants attempt to justify slavery through theological loopholes, but widespread religious opposition based on environmental ethics makes the trade economically and politically unsustainable. Colonial settlements develop as cooperative ventures with indigenous peoples rather than conquests over them. European colonists bring advanced sustainable technologies while learning traditional ecological knowledge from native populations. This creates unique hybrid civilizations that combine the best of both approaches to environmental stewardship. The economic exploitation of natural resources faces constant religious and ethical challenges. Mining, logging, and plantation agriculture must justify their methods according to environmental commandments. This leads to the development of the world's first sustainable extraction industries. Missionary work focuses on sharing technological knowledge and environmental restoration techniques, rather than simply converting people to European religious practices. Christian missionaries become leaders in developing sustainable methods for agriculture, clean water, and renewable energy in tropical and Arctic environments. Global trade networks develop around sustainable goods and environmentally responsible production methods, rather than simply extracting maximum profit from natural resources. Chapter 11: The Lost Gospels Speak. Hidden in caves near the Dead Sea, archaeologists discover ancient scrolls that contain alternative versions of biblical commandments. The Gospel of Thomas includes sayings of Jesus that emphasize environmental healing alongside spiritual salvation. "Blessed are those who restore what was broken in creation," reads one newly discovered verse. The Dead Sea Scrolls reveal that some early Jewish communities preserved oral traditions about additional commandments that Moses received but never wrote down. These lost teachings focus on humanity's responsibility to heal environmental damage and share resources equally among all peoples. Gnostic texts from early Christian communities in Egypt describe Jesus teaching disciples advanced methods for sustainable agriculture and clean water systems. These documents suggest that environmental stewardship was considered essential Christian knowledge that later got suppressed by political authorities. Ancient manuscripts discovered in Ethiopian monasteries contain alternative versions of biblical creation stories that emphasize ongoing human responsibility for maintaining divine order in nature. These texts describe Adam and Eve not as rulers over creation, but as gardeners responsible for protecting and healing the earth. Coptic Christian documents from the 4th century include detailed instructions for sustainable building techniques and renewable energy systems that early Christian communities developed in the Egyptian desert. These technological innovations were apparently considered part of spiritual practice rather than separate secular knowledge. Archaeological evidence suggests these alternative traditions influenced early Islamic scholarship, with Quranic commentaries referencing environmental teachings that parallel the lost Christian and Jewish texts. Chapter 12. The Vatican's Secret Archives. Deep beneath St. Peter's Basilica, in climate-controlled vaults that few humans ever see, the Vatican's secret archives contain thousands of documents that the Catholic Church has never made public. Recent leaked reports suggest that medieval papal correspondence discusses alternative versions of the Ten Commandments that emphasize environmental protection alongside traditional moral law. A 13th century document, allegedly signed by Pope Innocent III, describes a secret meeting with Eastern Orthodox patriarchs and Islamic scholars to compare different versions of divine environmental commandments preserved in their respective traditions. The document hints that all three Abrahamic faiths once shared advanced environmental teachings that were later suppressed for political reasons. Vatican archivists have reportedly catalogued Renaissance-era manuscripts that describe sustainable technologies developed by Catholic monasteries but never shared with the wider world. These include advanced methods for renewable energy, organic agriculture, and clean water systems that were centuries ahead of their time. Jesuit missionary reports from the 16th and 17th centuries allegedly describe indigenous peoples in South America who possessed environmental knowledge that paralleled lost biblical teachings. Some documents suggest Jesuit scholars believed these indigenous traditions preserved ancient wisdom that European Christianity had forgotten. Modern Vatican statements about environmental responsibility may be drawing from these secret historical documents, attempting to restore lost aspects of Christian environmental tradition without admitting that such knowledge was ever suppressed. The Church maintains strict controls over access to these archives, fueling speculation about what other environmental revelations might be hidden in their collections. Chapter 13. Islamic Controversies. Contemporary Islamic scholars in Cairo, Tehran, and Kuala Lumpur engage in heated debates about Quranic verses that seem to reference environmental commandments not found in Jewish or Christian traditions. Some argue that Islam preserved original divine environmental teachings that other Abrahamic faiths lost or suppressed over time. The Quranic concept of humans as trustees, Khalifa, of creation gets reinterpreted by progressive Islamic scholars as evidence that environmental protection was always central to Islamic teaching. They cite verses about balance in nature and humanity's responsibility to maintain divine order as proof that environmental commandments were integral to Muhammad's revelations. Sufi mystical traditions contain elaborate environmental practices that some scholars claim represent authentic preservation of ancient divine teachings. Sufi poetry and meditation techniques often focus on harmony with natural systems in ways that parallel the hypothetical alternative commandments we've been exploring. Traditional Islamic legal scholars, ulema, resist these interpretations, arguing that environmental concerns, while important, were never intended to be primary divine commands equal to worship and moral behavior. This creates growing tensions within Islamic educational and religious institutions worldwide. Some radical Islamic environmental movements claim that the Quran contains hidden environmental teachings that, if properly understood and implemented, could solve the modern ecological crisis. These groups organize protests and political campaigns based on their interpretations of Islamic environmental obligation. Archaeological discoveries in early Islamic sites have uncovered evidence of sophisticated sustainable technologies that suggest early Muslim communities took environmental responsibility very seriously as part of religious practice. Chapter 14: Archaeological Mysteries. In 2019, Israeli archaeologists working in the Sinai Peninsula made a discovery that shocked the religious world. Buried beneath centuries of sand, they found stone tablets carved with commandment-like laws that don't match any known biblical text. Carbon dating places these artifacts between 1400 and 1500 BC, exactly the time period when Moses would have climbed Mount Sinai. The tablets contain 10 commands written in ancient Hebrew, but their focus on environmental protection and social justice differs dramatically from traditional biblical commandments. "You shall heal the wounds of earth," reads one inscription. "You shall let no creature perish by human hand," declares another. International teams of archaeologists, linguists, and theologians have spent 4 years analyzing these artifacts. The stone composition matches geological samples from Mount Sinai. The carving techniques are consistent with other artifacts from Moses' time period. The Hebrew language shows dialectical features that match the era of the Exodus. Yet religious authorities from Judaism, Christianity, and Islam have offered conflicting responses to these discoveries. Some embrace the tablets as confirmation of environmental teachings within their traditions. Others denounce them as clever forgeries designed to undermine traditional faith. A few maintain cautious silence while privately funding additional research. The Israeli government has restricted access to the site where these tablets were discovered, claiming security concerns. This has fueled conspiracy theories about additional artifacts that might challenge established religious and historical narratives even more dramatically. Scientific analysis continues, but the implications of authentic alternative commandments from Moses' era would fundamentally challenge 3 major world religions' understanding of divine revelation. Chapter 15: The Interfaith Council. In unmarked conference rooms in Geneva, Switzerland, religious leaders from around the world gather for meetings that officially don't exist. The Interfaith Council on Alternative Revelation brings together Catholic cardinals, Orthodox patriarchs, Islamic ayatollahs, Jewish rabbis, and Protestant theologians to discuss discoveries that could shake the foundations of their faiths. Leaked documents from these secret meetings reveal intense debates about how to respond to archaeological evidence of alternative commandments. Some leaders argue for complete transparency, believing their faiths are strong enough to incorporate expanded understanding of divine revelation. Others insist that releasing such information would cause chaos and undermine religious authority worldwide. Meeting transcripts allegedly show discussions about controlled disclosure, gradually introducing environmental and social justice teachings as rediscovered aspects of traditional faith, rather than admitting they might represent alternative divine commands. This approach would allow religious institutions to evolve while maintaining their authority and avoiding theological crisis. The Council reportedly commissioned secret studies to predict global reactions to revelation of alternative commandments. Computer models suggest that younger, more environmentally conscious populations would embrace expanded divine environmental teachings. However, conservative religious communities might fragment or radicalize if they perceive their core beliefs as threatened. Some leaked documents hint that the Council has developed contingency plans for different disclosure scenarios. These range from gradual educational campaigns emphasizing environmental stewardship within existing traditions to complete revelation of alternative archaeological discoveries. The existence of these meetings remains officially denied by all participating religious institutions, but their influence on recent religious statements about environmental responsibility suggests the discussions are having real impact on religious leadership worldwide. Chapter 16: Digital Age: Morality. In Silicon Valley boardrooms, tech executives grapple with a revolutionary question. What if social media algorithms were programmed according to alternative commandments, emphasizing environmental protection and social justice? Companies like Facebook, Google, and Twitter face growing pressure to consider moral frameworks beyond profit maximization and user engagement. Imagine if Facebook's algorithm prioritized content that promoted environmental healing and community cooperation over posts that generate controversy and division. Instead of showing users information designed to keep them scrolling, the platform might highlight opportunities for environmental action and social justice work in their local communities. Google's search algorithms could be redesigned to emphasize websites and information sources that advance environmental sustainability and social equity. Rather than simply ranking sites by popularity and commercial value, searches might prioritize content that helps users make decisions aligned with Earth stewardship and human welfare. Twitter's trending topics might focus on environmental restoration projects and community-building initiatives instead of political conflicts and celebrity controversies. The platform could become a tool for organizing positive action rather than amplifying division and outrage. Artificial intelligence development, guided by alternative moral frameworks, would prioritize solving environmental and social problems rather than maximizing efficiency and profit. AI systems might be designed to help humans make better decisions for long-term sustainability rather than short-term gratification. Some tech companies have already begun experimenting with these approaches, developing apps and platforms specifically designed to promote environmental awareness and community cooperation. These experiments suggest that technology guided by alternative moral principles could reshape human behavior on a global scale. Chapter 17: Political Revolution. Around the world, political movements emerge calling for constitutional reforms based on alternative commandments that prioritize environmental protection and social justice above individual rights and national sovereignty. These movements argue that traditional political systems are inadequate for addressing global challenges like climate change, inequality, and environmental destruction. In New Zealand, the government passes revolutionary legislation granting legal rights to rivers and forests, treating natural systems as entities deserving protection equal to human citizens. This represents the first modern attempt to implement governance based on environmental commandments that place Earth stewardship above human convenience. Some European nations experiment with ecological constitutions that guarantee every citizen access to clean air, water, and soil, while obligating governments to prioritize environmental health in all policy decisions. These constitutional changes require economic systems to operate within ecological limits, rather than pursuing unlimited growth. Indigenous peoples worldwide point to these political developments as validation of traditional governance systems that many of their communities have preserved for thousands of years. They offer consultation and leadership for nations attempting to implement Earth-centered political structures. International conflicts arise as nations with different moral frameworks struggle to cooperate on global challenges. Countries prioritizing environmental commandments may refuse trade relationships with nations that permit destructive extraction industries, creating new forms of international tension. The United Nations faces pressure to revise its charter to include environmental protection and social justice as fundamental principles equal to national sovereignty and individual rights. Such changes would represent the most significant transformation of international law since the UN's founding. Chapter 18: The Climate Crisis Response. As global temperatures rise and environmental destruction reaches critical levels, world leaders increasingly argue that humanity's survival depends on adopting alternative moral frameworks that prioritize Earth protection above economic growth and national interests. The climate crisis becomes a test of whether humans can evolve morally fast enough to save themselves. Greta Thunberg and other young environmental activists explicitly call for moral revolution, arguing that current ethical systems are inadequate for the challenges facing humanity in the 21st century. They demand that governments and institutions operate according to commandments that prioritize environmental healing above all other considerations. The Pope releases encyclicals declaring environmental protection a religious obligation equal to traditional moral commandments. Islamic scholars issue fatwas requiring Muslims to prioritize Earth stewardship in all personal and political decisions. Jewish rabbis teach that environmental destruction violates divine commandments as seriously as murder or theft. Scientific reports increasingly frame environmental destruction in moral and spiritual terms, rather than simply technical or economic language. Researchers argue that solving climate change requires fundamental changes in human values and priorities, not just new technologies or policies. Some nations declare environmental emergencies that suspend normal legal procedures in favor of rapid implementation of environmental protection measures. These actions spark debates about whether environmental commandments justify limiting traditional freedoms and democratic processes. Youth movements around the world organize under religious and spiritual banners, claiming that environmental protection is a sacred duty that transcends political and national boundaries. Chapter 19: The Soul's Dilemma. As we stand at this crossroads of human history, each of us must wrestle with profound questions that challenge everything we thought we knew about right and wrong. If archaeologists have truly discovered alternative commandments from the same divine source that gave us traditional moral laws, what does this mean for our understanding of God's will for humanity? Are we prepared to consider that the moral foundation guiding civilization for thousands of years might be incomplete? Could it be that divine revelation includes environmental and social teachings that human institutions suppressed or lost over time? How would it change our daily lives if we truly believed that healing the earth was as important as personal morality? For parents raising children in this confusing time, the questions become deeply personal. Do we teach our kids the traditional values we learned, or do we embrace new understandings of divine commandments that emphasize environmental and social responsibility? How do we prepare them for a world that might operate according to completely different moral principles? Religious communities face unprecedented challenges as they grapple with archaeological and theological evidence that could transform their understanding of divine will. Faith leaders must decide whether to resist these discoveries or find ways to incorporate expanded revelation into their traditions. The psychological impact reaches beyond religious believers to affect anyone who has built their sense of right and wrong on Western moral traditions. Even secular ethics and legal systems trace their roots to commandments that might need fundamental revision in light of new discoveries and global challenges. Perhaps most challenging of all is the realization that accepting alternative commandments might require sacrifices and changes that feel overwhelming to contemplate. Chapter 20: The Forbidden Tablet. In a classified facility buried deep beneath the Nevada desert, behind layers of security that protect America's most dangerous secrets, sits a stone tablet that could change everything we believe about divine revelation and human destiny. Intelligence agencies from 12 nations guard its contents, while religious leaders from around the world demand access to what might be the original, unedited version of the Ten Commandments. The tablet was recovered during a covert operation in the mountains between Israel and Jordan, in caves that archaeological surveys claim don't exist. Satellite imagery of the region gets mysteriously corrupted whenever researchers attempt to study the location. Local Bedouin tribes speak in whispers about ancient guardians who have protected something sacred in those mountains for thousands of years. Carbon dating and linguistic analysis confirm that this tablet predates all known biblical texts by centuries. The commandments carved into its surface combine traditional moral laws with environmental and social justice commands in ways that could unite or destroy the world's major religions. Some commands match traditional teachings perfectly. Others demand radical changes that would transform human civilization. Religious leaders who have been granted classified access to the tablet's contents emerge from their briefings visibly shaken. Some refuse to discuss what they've seen. Others privately begin incorporating mysterious new teachings into their sermons and writings. A few have requested protective custody, claiming their lives are in danger for knowing what the tablet reveals. Government officials debate whether humanity is ready for revelation that could either solve our greatest global challenges or trigger religious wars that make past conflicts look like minor disagreements. The decision of whether to reveal the tablet's contents may determine whether our species survives the next century. But some knowledge, they say, might be too dangerous for the world to know. Unless, of course, it's exactly what we need to save ourselves before it's too late. The tablet waits in its vault, holding secrets that could transform human destiny, if we're brave enough to face what God actually commanded on that sacred mountain so long ago. What would you do if you discovered that everything you believed about divine will was about to change forever?